Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Coffee Hour with me, Paul Abernathy. If you've never been to Coffee Hour before and you're new and you're joining us, thanks for joining us, taking time out of your day to join us as we talk about all things electrically related on Coffee Hour, whether it's business, whether it's dealing with employees, disgruntled, whatever you want. Remember, you can always send your questions to me at paulabernathy.com. That's the website you go to. It's a portal. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything to do so. And you're allowed to post and send me whatever questions you want on whatever topic that you want me to discuss on Coffee Hour. And this is a good opportunity for you to sit in the lounge chair and chill while I elaborate on various things. So, again, thanks for joining me. You can also listen to all of our podcasts and watch these episodes over on our mobile app. It's available on our website. It is free. It doesn't cost you anything. Just go get the app, and it's a free. And it doesn't put anything on your phone. All it does is it puts a little link on your phone. That's all it does. What's up? Welcome, Paul. Thanks for joining me down in Houston. Appreciate having you here. Again, as I always say, folks, let me know where you're from. If you're a fast track student, you've been in our program. If not, it's okay too. We welcome anybody here that wants to come and join us here in the morning for the coffee hour. And today's coffee hour, we're going to be talking about grounding electrode conductor installations. I had a request from a viewer who said, Paul, would I be willing to talk about that? So I will try to go into that today and see if we can't touch on the majority of the installation aspect to these grounding electrode conductors. And in some of it, obviously for many of you, it may be just straightforward. You're used to it and you don't have any, this is like, this is not going to be an interesting topic, but you're able to ask me any question you want and I'll try to answer it. Let's see here. Let me follow up. And I do have a couple, maybe I'll look at a couple, let's ask Paul's here. As you can see, I get tons of these things. As you can see me scrolling through these, literally hundreds of these, and most of them I answer in an email or something like that, or they end up being a podcast or something. But we will see if we can get to a couple of those, as well as any questions you might have. Good morning, Frank. Thanks for joining me. Yes, it is almost Friday. We're getting there. It seems since I started working back out of the office here in Virginia, these weeks they seem to just flow quick. Things go by extremely quick. Red Dog, what's up? Fast track student all the way out in Los Angeles, California. Charlie, good morning. Welcome. Thanks for joining us again this morning. So like everybody's pretty much from YouTube. And so, but we are running up over on our Fast Tracks tube as they seem to have got it all fixed. And so it looks like that's still working. And I'm double check it real quick while I'm here just to see if folks are on that platform. Absolutely. It's still working. And it's a slider, which allows you to delay it, speed it up, whatever you want, that type of thing. So let's see here. Miles joining us. Good morning from Pittsburgh, chilly Pittsburgh. Master's exam is tomorrow. Feel way more confident after completing your Fast Tracks program and watching your morning sessions. Well, good, Miles. Here's the deal. Here's the what is it? What is it that one with Will Ferrell in it? That movie. He goes, "Here's the deal. I'm the best there is. I'm the best there ever was. Nobody's messing." I don't remember what movie that was, but it was funny. It was, you got this. Go in there confident. It's not about whether you're going to pass. It's about what the record is that you're going to set. It's a mindset you have to be in and go into, and never give up. So regardless of what happens, you're gonna look at them and you're gonna be like, all right, well, I'll be back to nail it again. Or you just knock the roof off while you're there. Some people test well and some people don't, and so just get focused. But what you need to do is at this point, if you're testing tomorrow, then there's no second guessing. At this point, you know it or you don't. And the only thing I recommend the night before is to, maybe if you're you can go watch some of the videos over on Fast Track's Tube, watch a few electrical videos, but don't get too deep in anything. Talladega Nights, that's what it was, Talladega Nights. And just relax. And you know what? I tell people all the time, when it comes to exam prep, the night before, look, if you know it, you know it. You're not going to learn it overnight. Otherwise, people wouldn't have studied, right? For a significant amount of time that you put effort into it. So just relax. Don't stress out tonight. The worst thing you want to do is start going through material and trying to think you can cram it. And then the next thing you know, you start second guessing yourself. That'd be the worst thing you could ever do. You're ready. You've been through it. You know how to maneuver the code book. You know how to go from the code book into the index. You know how to use a table of contents. You know, you got this. I expect you to come back and let us know you nailed it. Let's see. Charlie says, every day is Wednesday when you start your own business. I would think it's almost like every day is Monday. But I get your point. You're always in the middle of the week. You never get to the end, and it's always past the beginning. It's just like you're in that. What is that other movie? Dude, I'm having movie blanks today. What is that movie? Groundhog Day. It's just over and over and over again when you're in business. You know what I'm saying? Most of you know it's if you're in business for yourself, you got taxes to worry about, and you got your contributions that you have to make. That's what people don't realize when they work for somebody. And let me jump on that stump real quick, because again, I support electricians. Y'all know that. I am electrician's electrician. I believe in licensure. I believe in education. I believe in not spreading bullshit on social media that's not correct, and I call it out. It offends people sometimes, but that's okay because I'm an equal opportunity offender, is what I like to tell people. I'm not always the best flavor in the morning but at the end of the day, I will always go to bat for the electrician, unless the electrician just is halfway doing something or not meeting the standards that I think they should hold to the industry. Then I am opinionated of it. I have an opinion of it and things like that. So I just love this trade. And so people don't realize when you're in business and you're in business for yourself, all the things as an employee, when I worked for somebody or worked for somebody as an employee, I was just thinking about the paycheck. When you become an owner, you're thinking about, okay, I got to think about your paycheck. My paycheck always comes at the end. You know that old saying that people say when you're in business, they say, make sure you get, CPAs say this. They say, make sure you pay yourself first. They have never been in business. They have never. It may be a CPA for somebody else, but they don't understand. You, as a business owner, you'd never pay yourself first, because I need to make my vendors whole. I need to pay my bills. I need to make sure that I'm paying my people, because they're not going to come to work or they're going to get disgruntled and everything's going to go downhill from there. I don't get paid until everybody else. And I think that's one of the things I watch people on TV, like the Dave Ramseys and things like that, who give advice. For example, they'll give advice, don't use a credit card. That is probably can be good. It depends on who you are, right? For your business. I love using a credit card because I pay for everything in my business with a credit card to get my points back, or that money cash back. And I make sure I pay it off at the end of the month. Not everybody can do that. But in business, one of my goals was to make sure that I paid things off at the end of the month so that I got the cash back type stuff. And again, it was important to me. Also builds your credit and all those other type of things. So when he said, don't use credit cards, I'm like, if you already suck at managing money, then no, credit cards aren't the answer. If you can manage your money, pay things off on time, want to keep your billing processes simple, because credit cards keep billing processes simple, especially if you give a business credit card. It's amazing. Credit cards work wonderful. It's basically using somebody else's money for a length of time until you have to pay it off. That type of thing. So anyway, Eric said, is there a national NEC test passing rate? Oh, no. I'm not aware of anyone nationally because, every state wants to pound their chest and have their own test. You do have that one that's trying to get something nationwide, but I don't think they're getting a foothold very good. So I don't know the national. I can tell you what the passing rate in Texas was pretty low. When we last time I was involved in the exam prep or creating their exams, the percentages of pass was really, really low. And throw you a number, I'm thinking the percentages was for masters, for example, once we switched over to 2 tests, I want to think, don't quote me, I want to think it was 35, 40%, 50%. It was a 50-50 or less, because now there was 2 separate exams, that type of thing. So, but no, I'm not aware of any national passing rate, but we have a lot of electricians, and I have a lot of students, and I know I'm not the only one. So I would, we're aiming to change that. We want to make it higher. We're gonna raise the bar on that. Dominic, thanks for joining me this morning. There you go. Hump day. TGI, good morning. South Alabama in the house. Thanks for joining me. Dan from Chicago. Thanks for joining me, Dan. Glad you could be here. All right. So we're going to talk grounding electrode conductor installation today. And we're going to look at it. And this comes out of our grounding and bonding program, by the way. So any illustrations you see or anything we talk about is clearly documented in our grounding and bonding program. And it might depend on which one you're in, but the 2023 grounding and bonding program flat out is one of the best programs that we offer, and it's very popular. And if you buy a bundle, for example, let me show you how popular it is. If you buy a bundle with the 2020 and the 2023 Fast Tracks Enhanced, you get the grounding and bonding included. Okay, so we think it's on those. We think it's important to be able to get that. So let me go on and get over to and talk about it a little bit. Okay, so what we're going to be looking at today is more specifically, and again, you got questions, please put them in the comments. I love answering comments. And again, if you're just popping in and you haven't told me where you're from, shout out, do me a favor. If you like the content we've been putting out in the mornings, encourage me to get up and do them in the mornings. Give us a thumbs up and share it. We much appreciate it. For some reason, the likes and the shares on whatever platform you're watching on seem to help. All right, so what do we got? We've got Dave. Thank you for coming, Dave. Also, I will address yesterday, somebody asked me a question yesterday, I don't know who it was, that asked me a question about adjustable trip circuit breakers and sizing the conductors to it. And we do have provisions for that in 240.6. We have 240.6, the A, the standard, then we have B, C, D. We have other provisions for when you can adjust stuff. But the question was yesterday, I believe, and I kind of thought about it, it's like for the adjustable trip, do we have to size the conductors to the full size? And no, most of those adjustable trips are designed in a way, the gear. So it's not something that you would see on an everyday basis for residential, and even light commercial. But industrial, things like that, you might see it where it's an adjustable trip setting. And there are provisions for you to be able to set it. But now typically these are set up so that you can lock them out or that you can't change it. And so there's also a clear issue where if somebody could possibly, if somebody individual, can't say homeowner because they're not going to see those type of adjustable trips in there. But if somebody could turn it to its highest output and there was no way to keep somebody from doing that, then I can see very well making them size the conductor to the full size of the overcurrent device. Okay, I could just see that because it's just easily could turn it up. But most of these that we deal with just adjustable trips have some feature that is a lockout feature or something that you, once it's set, that you can't increase it, that type of thing. So there are provisions where obviously it makes sense if I have an adjustable circuit breaker and I want to set it at 75 and the max is 100, that why should I have to size the conductors to 100 if I can set it at 75 and lock it at 75 so that the average person can't just go in and turn it up? Again, at the end of the day, you can't fix stupid, and people will do stupid things, but there are provisions in the code in 240.6 that can help you adjust that type of thing. But for the most part, we protect the conductor at its ampacity. And so if you have an adjustable, there has to be a provision where somebody can't just come in. It's almost the same thing for the EVSEs, right? Whereas you can have now ability for an EVSE because maybe you don't have headroom on your house, and you would dial it back in order to reduce the amount of the output of the EVSE so that you can put it on a house with the existing service. And you're thinking, well, I can have this mechanism that allows me to dial it back, whether it's electronic, remote, whatever it is in the equipment. If that is there, then it has to be in a way that the homeowner can't come in and just say, oops, turn it up, that type of scenario. So typically when it comes to that, you would. If there was not a mechanism for that, and again, I don't know every automatic trip mechanism out there. I've just been out of it for so long for those type of things. What we have, then if there is a possibility for any Tom, Dick, and Harry to go turn that up and increase the level of the overcurrent, then all of a sudden your conductor is not protected, that would be a problem. So I can see where if that wasn't proven to an AHJ and he went in there and saw something set at 100, but the maximum was 200, just throwing numbers, I can see where an AHJ would say, whoa, time out. So show me that this cannot be turned up, or the procedure for what would have to take place for you to turn it up. In an industrial environment, that's no big deal because they do this stuff all the time. As long as if they've got, it's like saying, if I've got a 200 amp panel, people say, you mean I can't run 100 amps to that? Well, a remote distribution panel could have a 200 amp main breaker and a panel could be rated 200 amps. Could I only put 100 amps for the load to it? Could I size 100 amps? Yes. Okay. Because now that's just a disconnect on the load side. You see what I'm saying? I still have to protect the conductor at its ampacity on the supply side. You get what I'm saying? So somebody asked that, and was that you, Charlie? And so, and there are provisions in that. So that's the one thing I wanted to point it out. So if you go look at 240.6a, you go look at 240.4b, when you don't go over the 800 amps, you see a provision in there for adjustable trips. And at the end of the day, we have to make sure the conductor is protected at its ampacity, and there's no way for Happy Harry whoever to go in and be able to turn it above that. They would defeat the purpose. So most of the manufacturers that make those devices are pretty good at making those adjustable trip modules and how they can keep somebody from just going in and just turning that crap up. Okay. Now, if an industrial guy does it that knows how to do it, and he knows that it's only rated for 100 and he turns it up to 200, well, again, you can't fix stupid, right? It's just, that's part of your everybody's training. You know what I'm saying? Hopefully I covered that. I did see it. So I wanted to make sure I did cover it. Carlos, Fort Worth, Texas, heading to Waco for a slab roughing. Dude, do videos, man. Do some videos. Put it on TikTok. It looks like TikTok is probably going to be saved. Y'all know I can't stand TikTok, but it looks like it's going to be saved. Give them an extension or something like that. And I'll get into the lesson because our lesson's going to go pretty quick. So we're just enjoying the morning, having a conversation. Hopefully you chime in. Let me know what you thought. This is what Coffee Hour is all about. I will get to the lesson or what we'll talk about. But TikTok. I love the platform. I love how it works. I love how simple it is. I don't like the behind the scenes people that the moderators, because dude, I get banned for everything. I'm just saying. I guess because I'm a loudmouth and I spout off stuff. But and everybody's skin is so thin that when you say something back to somebody, then it all of a sudden gets banned for bullying or something like that. I mean, grow up, okay? That type of thing. So anyway, yet they'll put pictures on there of I've seen naked pictures pop up on my feed. Don't judge me. But I seen naked pictures pop up or something, and I'm thinking, y'all let that on there, but y'all won't let me tell somebody that they're stupid because of something they post because I'm bullying them. Anyway, I would love for it to be taken over by somebody else. I would love for Elon to take it and treat it just like he does X, although I can't stand the X platform. But I love TikTok's platform. So that's why it's not going to go away. Too many millions of people. Too many people use it. And things like that are just not going to go away when 170 million or 200 million people. This is not going to happen. Good morning, Manny from Wyoming. Thanks for joining me. Glad to have you here. Adam, what's up in the house? You are most welcome. I try to pass on. Again, here's the thing. Here's the thing, Adam. You have to wade through all my BS and my talking and my ranting and my all this other stuff. You got to filter through all that to get to the learning, but that's just me. I can't change me. That thing. That's right. Pints of coffee. Damn straight. Okay. Anthony, you know what? You one of those guys that are always the last one in the room and grab the seat in the back, right? Are you one of those guys? Because those are the kind of guys that I call on seminars, okay? Everybody thinks I'm going to call on the guy in the front row, and so they stay away from the front row. When I'm on seminars, I'm doing the stage thing. Back when I was doing a lot of that, I actually would point to people in the back. I was like, and they would be like, oh, are you one of those guys? Or are you one of those move your way to the front row kind of guy? Anthony, I did get your email. Sorry, I am so behind on emails transitioning here. I promise you, I don't have a brochure. I would say print out the CMECP pages on the website, all that kind of stuff, and print out the pages and give it to them that way. We have not created a brochure yet. Good news is we will create a brochure and everything as we focus more on the CMECP. I'll tell you, folks, the CMECP has never been something that we've overly promoted, because we don't just want everybody in the program. We only want the elite. And so we have just let it be passive. But in this year, I'm hiring an executive director just for the CMECP program to take it forward, that type of thing. And we're going to be doing more marketing on that type of program. Okay. So Eric says, speaking of social media, I have a YouTube channel, all about industrial motor controls. Post a link to it in here. Let people get to it. Share the love. Damn right. What is Anthony says? I'm a public servant. I got tied up with some residents at the counter. I hear you. Likely story. I worked for a municipality. Okay, I was the head of the plan review and inspections. So, man, don't be trying to come in here with them excuses. All right, let's go on and get into today's lesson. I'm rattling on. All right, so what we're going to be talking about today, guys, is we're going to be focusing on, 250.64, and we're going to go systematically trying to go through a little bit of this, and as it comes out of our grounding and bonding program. Okay, so let me get you over here. So we'll be looking at 250.64 today. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in there. If you're new and you want to get into a good electrical training program for grounding and bonding, go to this website or that website right there and check out our grounding and bonding course. It does not expire. It's perfect to have in your pocket, and it covers all the main topics when it comes to grounding and bonding with illustrations, that type of thing. In case grounding and bonding is a tough subject for people. It seems it always is a tough subject. All right, anyway, 250.64 in our National Electrical Code. And again, I'm in the 2023 edition of the NEC. It says the requirements: grounding electrode conductors at the service at each building or structure where supplied by a feeder or branch circuit or at separately derived systems must be installed as specified in 250.64A through G. Okay. So here you see we're calling out, that is a footnote that's telling you that is from the National Electrical Code. Okay. So in our program, when you see highlights like this, that's all it's telling you is this: we extracted it from the NFPA, okay? So that's the requirements. All right, every service has to have a grounding electrode system. Each building, detached structures that you're supplying with a feeder or a branch circuit has to have a grounding electrode system. Now, the exception to the rule for branch circuits feeding a detached structure, if it's the only thing you're going to be putting in there is a couple receptacles or lights, and you run a branch circuit out there, that doesn't matter whether you ran a 12-3 and you had technically two circuits with one shared neutral, or you just ran one 12 circuit, a UF 12-2 or whatever. If all you're doing is some lights and some receptacles, and you're not going to be putting in an overcurrent protected device in there, and all you're doing, you still got to have your disconnect there. Still got to have your 225 disconnect. Okay, under feeders, outside branch, and feeders. Still got to have your disconnect means, which could be a snap switch, okay, by the way, at that building. If you're not going to put a panel in there with a main breaker, then you don't have to establish a grounding electrode system, okay? Ground rods, UFR ground. Hopefully you know what a UFR ground is. If you're not, let me know. I'll explain it. You have to put all that in, but there is an allowance to say, you know what? It's just my man shed. It's a she shed, right? Okay. It's if it's Anthony, it's his let me get away and make up my excuses for why I'm late shed. You know what I'm saying? It's just a shed, and all you're doing is running a branch circuit over to it. Then you have some allowances where you don't have to put a grounding electrode system in. Why? Because you're going to run 4 conductors to it, and you're going to have a separate neutral. You're going to have a separate equipment ground. You're going to isolate them. Okay. So at the end of the day, follow the rules. Okay. All right. Today is Pick on Anthony Day. All right. Next. All right. So let's talk about the conductors. Now, we're all extremely familiar with copper, right? We run copper to the grounding electrode conductor every day of the week. In fact, we're even familiar with the fact that if we have a rod, pipe, or plate, and that's the only thing we have, then we can run a 6 copper or 4 aluminum, although be careful with the 4 aluminum because, again, it can't be within 18 inches of the earth. We'll see that in a minute. But we're familiar with copper. Copper's king, okay? But you can have aluminum, and you can have that other conductor, which I won't talk about, right? So look at here. All right, folks, hold on real quick. Hold on. We have Ron Fortunato in the room. Now, why is that important? Because Ron is our latest CMECP. How about that? Congratulations. If you want to know about the program and you want to know whether it was tough or not, and if Ron had to wait a little longer than normal. All right, it's enough of that. Enough of that clapping for you, Ron. Ron had to wait longer than normal because of the transition and the paperwork that we had to do and getting feedback back from all of our CMECPs that voted and gave comments and feedbacks and all this stuff. Plus, he went through the program, went through the proctored, recorded exam. And I can't remember, Ron, did you go through that twice? Did you have to take that twice? I can't remember. But anyway, Ron made it all the way to the end. If you want to know about how tough the program is, but rewarding, just ask Ron. He's not a paid shill. I didn't pay Ron to be here, okay? Right? But went through the program and did a wonderful job, okay? All right, let's see here. So let's go on. Okay, so let's look. So let's just say we do want to run aluminum or this other conductor as a grounding electrode conductor, okay? What did he say? Negative, only once. Oh, okay, you talking about taking the exam. Okay, cool. I couldn't remember, bro. I'm just trying to remember. We have a couple new students, I should say candidates going through the program right now. They are struggling with the time requirement. They are almost out of time, and I can't do anything about the time thing. But the time thing is challenging. Getting it done in 6 months is tougher than most people give it credit for, especially when you got life that gets in the way. But it's rewarding once you get there. And as I said in the email, Ron, make sure you send me your full, accurate address so we can get you out your pins and all your other stuff and your coin and all your good stuff. Make sure you do that. And then start using CMECP with the registered mark after your name, bro, on all your social media. Get it updated, okay? Share the love. You're an ambassador now for the program. Share it. All right. So 250.64a, if we want to run that or this, okay, as a grounding electrode conductor, we can. Now, what are the requirements? Well, the requirements are the grounding electrode conductors can be bare, covered, or insulated. Aluminum or blank, I'm not going to say it, must comply with the following. Okay. All right. So if it's bare or covered conductors that you want to use, okay, a lot of people get that confusing. Bare or covered, okay? Covered could be inside of a sheathing. We have actually conductors that are considered single conductor cables as well, in case you didn't know that. Most of the regular conductors like XHHW, things like that, are insulated conductors. But you have THHN, which actually has a covering, a nylon covering on it. So we have you have different options, but it's not only just bare, okay? However, if you're using bare or covered conductors for your grounding electrode conductor, and this says if you're using bare or covered without an extruded polymeric covering, so this would not be without an extruded polymeric covering, because what we do is when you're doing a conductor and it's insulated, we extrude a polymeric covering over it, like the nylon, like the sometimes another type of PVC material, which again would be a polymeric covering. Okay, so if you have bare or covered conductors without an extruded polymeric covering, must not be installed where subject to corrosive conditions or be installed in direct contact with concrete. Okay, so I can install bare or covered, okay? But the covered cannot be what? It has to be the one that is without extruded polymeric, and I'm gonna be honest with you, most of them are gonna have some type of polymeric extruded. They're gonna be using THHN, or they're gonna be using XHHW or something like that. They're gonna be some kind of extrusion over it. So again, it creates a muddy mess on what people are talking about here. But the vast majority of people will try to run the bare. And if you're running aluminum, bare, all of that type of stuff, it cannot be installed where it's subject to corrosive condition or installed in direct contact with the earth. Okay, so there you go. Now, discussion. As can be seen from this section, bare or covered aluminum or that other conductor, grounding electrode conductors are not permitted to be used if the conductor will be in direct contact with the masonry, okay, or in the earth. So there it nixes your ability to run the aluminum all the way to the, let's say, a ground rod, because a ground rod has to be at or below grade level. I would typically say below, and typically below the frost line where practical, okay? But you know how you people leave it above, which again technically violates the code, unless it was a 10-foot rod and you're putting some kind of protective over the 2-foot that's sticking out, because we have to have 8 foot in the earth. Yeah, it's another story, but yeah, so that's going to eliminate you running aluminum, but it doesn't stop you from running aluminum to, let's say, a terminal bus, right? Okay, anyway, or will be subject to corrosive conditions unless provided with a polymeric extrusion covering. Okay, all right. So you notice it says up here that you can't run bare or a covered conductor without the poly extrusion covering. Okay, where it's subject to corrosion. But again, you could use one of the conductors that's insulated that also has the polymeric extrusion over it. Okay, good. Another example would be just nylon extrusion over a insulated conductor. That's be fine. And it says the restrictions are on bare or covered aluminum or that other conductor stem from concerns that the conductor will corrode and fail without the polymeric protective covering as a barrier to the actual conductor. Okay, so this is the insulation and the covering that's extruded over the insulation in that location. Okay, so very common for people, to be honest with you, it's very common for people to run THHN, THW, THHN, THWN-2 or XHHW for this application and run it down. Some people might even run an RHH or an RHW-2. They have those with covering and non-coverings. But it is a polymeric extrusion over top of the conductive material, so it is covered. But we're not running bare aluminum, and we're not running the bare other thing either that I'm not going to talk about, okay? Not going to talk about that other conductor today, okay? I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to end up in trouble again. All right. Now, it says Article 100 includes the definition of conductor, covered, and the definition indicates that the covering is not suitable as an insulation, okay? And we know nylon, for example, is not an insulation. It's just a covering, okay? All right? So many types of covering can be used by wire manufacturers on conductors because this section simply requires a polymeric covering and no level, quality, or minimum performance level is included in this requirement. The installer and electrical inspector should verify that the polymeric covering is suitable for the environment and intended purpose. Well, let me tell you something. I can promise you that polymeric, I can tell you, for example, that PVC is very resistant, okay? Very resistant to the issues of corrosive environments. And we also make coverings where we would put a PVC covering over something, or we would put something like a thermal set, which is a cross-link polyethylene covering over. All of these things, if we choose to do that as a manufacturer and give you that, and there's single insulated conductors, which has a conductive material, has an insulation, then it has a covering over that, is very resistant to corrosive conditions, okay? So again, manufacturers can furnish all that information if you're wanting to run a covered conductor, okay? Not just an insulated, but a cover, because it makes it very clear that what we're talking about is not really the insulation, but the covering, okay? Which typically would have no insulating value, all right? Anyway, manufacturers will furnish you this information. I can tell you that we will at Encore Wire furnish you that information if necessary. Now, what you're going to see is this is a detailed graphic. I'm going to share this graphic with you. So here's a graphic, and we're just showing you 1, 2, 3. So this is showing you all of the requirements here. Let me bring you back to the code. Okay, so here's what we've got, right? Damn it. There we go, right here, if you can see all of them. So there was the one we read, okay? And then you've got a second caveat for these grounding electrode conductors. Again, we're talking about what? We're talking about aluminum or that other conductor that is not copper. Is 2, it says terminations made within outdoor enclosures that are listed and identified for the environment shall be permitted within 18 inches of the bottom of the enclosure. So what does that mean? So you have this first rule that says you can't run, you can run bare, covered, or insulated aluminum or that other conductor that is not copper, okay? But it shall comply with the following. The first one, it's just reminding you that bare or covered without any polymeric covering, okay, can't be installed in concrete or the corrosive condition or the corrosive material, okay? Can't be installed in the earth, okay? It's aluminum, all those type of things, right? Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, it's saying, you know what? When you make these terminations, I'm going to let you make these terminations within 18 inches of the earth, okay? Because in a minute, you're going to see that you can't, right? But external to buildings, outside. But here it's saying, you know what, though, if you do run it and you come up into an enclosure, like a transformer enclosure that is already rated for the environment, it's an outdoor enclosure, NEMA 3Rs or whatever, it's saying, okay, look, if the enclosure's rated for it, then you come up into it and maybe they put the lugging or the terminations down lower than 18 inches because of the equipment and it's rated for that environment. You're like, well, how would I comply with the next one that I got to do, which is, terminating within 18 inches of the earth? How do I comply with that? Well, okay, no problem. If that outdoor equipment enclosure is listed and identified for the environment to which it's being put, and God, you would hope it would be, because that's where it is, then you're going to be permitted to have those conductors where? Within 18 inches of the bottom of the enclosure, whatever the bottom would be. Okay? So that's a provision right there. And then the third one is, if I can scroll it up enough that you can see it, right here, it says, okay, granted, okay, we got these rules, we got this rule now. I'm going to let you go lower than 18 inches because you're inside of an enclosure that's rated for the environment. Okay. Last one, it says aluminum or that other conductor other than copper, conductors external to a building or equipment enclosures shall not be terminated within 18 inches of the earth. Okay, so this is outside. This is not in the enclosure. So you're going to be limited so that you're not going to be terminating within 18 inches of the earth. Now, this does not say that I can't take an aluminum grounding electrode conductor from my service outside and put it on a bus, okay? And you say, well, that aluminum is showing. Okay, well, aluminum, if you terminate everything right, aluminum is very, very resistant to corrosion, believe it or not, beyond the initial corrosion where it starts to get this covering on it, this patina. After that, it actually helps to preserve the longevity of the connection. It's just at the connection we have to worry about the metal-to-metal contact, and a lot of people want to use things like no-locks and all this stuff that we use on aluminum conductors, which, by the way, is not required by the National Electrical Code. It says if it is employed, it can't be detrimental to the conductor, can't be detrimental to the installation. But if you want to use the antioxidant compound on aluminum, go for it. It's your choice. unless the manufacturer of the equipment demands it. It's totally however you feel. If you're an AHJ and you require it, you're overstepping your boundaries. But you know what? That's for the electricians in your area to fight. Okay. So anyway, there we get some allowances. Now, here you see just some extra commentary that's talking about things like that. And the one that I like is this one. It says where the bottom of an enclosure is concrete, as in with an open bottom equipment such as an outdoor switchboard and switchgear, covered aluminum or copper or that other conductor, aluminum GECs with an extruded polymeric covering and insulated conductor are permitted to be in direct contact with the concrete. Remember, the prohibiting rule was what? That you couldn't be bare or it couldn't be covered without extruded polymeric. That couldn't be covered. But if you get one that is extruded with polymeric covering, then you're okay. All right? All right, so that was just kind of breaking that down. So I want to take us to the illustration because that's a little bit better. So here's our examples of the three situations. So here we have this right here, okay? And I did have one guy tell me one time, he said, Paul, that's a copper bus. And if this is depicting aluminum to it, isn't that going to be copper to aluminum issue? And my laugh to them, my answer to them was, this is just showing illustrations. So again, this right here, this lug right here is an ALCU and it's designed zinc coated. It's allowed for the transition and it's not dissimilar metals. Okay. Does that get rid of all of my hate email on that one? Try to explain that because I have those people that look at this illustration and say that. Okay. All right. Number one, you can see this one right here. So that could be bare or covered aluminum conductor without an extruded polymeric covering. They are not permitted in corrosive areas or in direct contact with concrete. But if you're not dealing in the corrosive areas, again, subject to your HJ's determination, everybody argues outside is a corrosive environment, but that's the wire. Once it comes down to the termination, as long as it's terminated in properly, you're okay. Number two, here it says terminations of aluminum conductors are permitted within 18 inches of the bottom of enclosures that is listed and identified for the environment. So this is kind of like a pad, and this is like a transformer, that type of thing. And typically the terminations in there are closer to the bottom, usually closer to the bottom front. So that is okay, as long as that enclosure is rated for it. Remember, if it's inside, you're okay. That would be where it talks about enclosures outside. And then three, here it says aluminum conductors external to buildings. Like here, aluminum conductors external to buildings or equipment enclosures not permitted to be terminated within 18 inches of the earth. Okay? So if I'm outdoors, then I have to have at least 18 inches clearance of earth. So if you're going to use an aluminum grounding electrode conductor, make sure you put your bus up high enough so you're not within 18 inches of the earth if you're going to be doing something like a bus setup like this. Okay? All right. More information. Wire insulations such as THHN, THWN-2, or X are included in Table 310.41, and the insulation formulation is included in the Wire Insulation Safety Standard. Grounding electric conductors that have these or similar recognized insulation types are permitted, listen here, folks, because this is what I told you earlier, are permitted in contact with masonry and in other locations where the atmospheric condition would not be corrosive to the insulation. Okay? Areas close to the ocean. So this is a recommendation we tell people about this. If you have areas and you're close to the ocean, and similar areas may have heavy levels of salt in the moisture in the air and could constitute a corrosive problem for insulated aluminum or that other conductor other than copper that are not otherwise adequately protected. So this is why in some jurisdictions, when Anthony's down near the water or somebody's near water, then they might say, you know what, I know what the code says, but we're in an environment where it's an elevated corrosive environment because of the salt content in the air. And that is where you get manufacturers recommend and say, you know what, that example, it would be okay to use things like antioxidant compounds on aluminum terminations. Why? And personally, my personal opinion, and I hate to get personal on it, But if I was doing work near the ocean where I knew there was a high level of salt, I would recommend antioxidant compound on both copper and aluminum on terminations. That's just me. People say, what? On copper? But yes, I would. And only thing you want to make sure is that the antioxidant compound you use is adequate for the conductive material that you're using it for. Years ago, it was not. The other thing to be aware of is today they're more petroleum based, and you could have a manufacturer of equipment that say not to use a petroleum based product on their equipment. So got to read the instructions, got to follow the instructions and follow all that kind of stuff. But just little things to think about. Okay. All right. Another acceptable insulation example of acceptable insulation is conductors with an insulation designation that includes the W. THW, hardly anybody uses that anymore. THWN, you're really not going to find that anywhere anymore, just THWN. I think Southwire still uses that on its reels from 14, 12, and 10, the coil packs. But most everybody today is going to be using THWN-2, that type of thing, or XHHW-2. And it's still the W's, but they're significant. Now, why is it significant for this to be -2 on these products in a wet location? Because with the 75-degree rating for adjustment and corrections when they're in a wet, they don't get to use the 90 for adjustment and correction unless they have the -2 after it. And that goes the same for XHHW as well. Okay, even though it has 2 H's, it's still only going to be 75 in a wet. It needs that -2 to be 90 in a wet so that you can do adjustment and corrections from the 90 if you need to. Okay. Let's see here. On the water, if you don't, it will oxide in a month. Yeah, and I'm okay with the oxidation of the surface oxidation, right? But we're worried more about the terminations. And so to be honest with you, I sat on a panel for this. If I torque a conductor properly in its termination, and I torque it properly, that there is going to be a situation where the metal-to-metal contact's not going to be degraded whether you use antioxidant or not, right? And any other corrosion that you may get around it is not going to be short-term detrimental. Long-term, it can be detrimental to the surface and cause other problems. Of course, with steel, if it's got, doesn't have protectant on it, it's going to rust and other things are going to break down. It's kind of like your enclosures, the bottoms start rusting out and whatever because they're coated, as they're steel, but they might have a electroplated coating on it, and then that starts to get scratched up or whatever, and then they start to rust, and the next thing you know, it just deteriorates. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to tell people what to do, but if you're in an environment that is a high salt environment near the ocean, like, as an electrician, I don't want to come back. Be honest with you. People think, well, I want the service call. I don't. I want to install it and I want to be done. And so sometimes taking a little extra protection or a little extra precautions, okay. So people say, this is a great example. Here you go, folks. Here's a great example from me going above code. There you go. I tell you, code is the bare minimum. You want a good example of going above code? Okay, well, go to an area where it's a lot of salt water and a lot of salt in the air and things like that. You see it stack up on windows, that clouding. It's salt. Salt's corrosive, things like that. Okay, then here's your above code recommendation. Go ahead and use an antioxidant compound, So that type of thing. So, zinc does. So that's the thing today. Most of the stuff today, the terminations, because of the metals, are using the zinc, and zinc does not. And so again, that's why we tell people it's all about the connection today. Really, it's all about making that metal-to-metal contact and that type of thing that we're worried about. And it's not so much the zinc, it's the oxygen and stuff that gets into the conductor where it actually makes a connection. And if you don't torque it right, you can create arcs in there. And that type of scenario. So it's all about torquing, things like that. But if you're in freshwater areas like that, there's no significant need to use the antioxidant compound for what I'm saying about. Only in areas where you might have a high salt content. But that's just me making a statement. Not saying that's code, not saying that's anywhere published. That's not saying us as a manufacturer of wire and cable is going to tell you to do that. No, we're not. But again, it's just a couple things to think about. Okay. Let's see here. Let me get back here. Make sure I at least get my topic. I'll look if I got time. I'll go over some of the comments. So keep them coming. But we'll make sure I at least get past some of this information here this morning. Okay. All right. So there we go. All right. So A2. So we looked at A1. Okay. We got deep into A1 for the moisture for all these terminations. So let's look deep A2. A2 says terminations made within 18 with outdoor enclosures that are listed and identified for the environment are permitted within 18 inches of the bottom of the enclosure. So I'm able to make them in those type of things. Now, again, you have NEMA rated enclosures and that type of thing. And you have like type 3R, NEMA 3R, which is just an enclosure rating, that type of thing. Well, then you can, in there, you could make those grounding electrode conductors that are the aluminum or the other one that says copper in it but is not. Then you could make those connections within 18 inches of the bottom of the enclosure as long as the enclosure is listed and identified for the location to which it is being used. And of course, the third one, as we said, is for aluminum or this other conductor external to a building. Here it says that it's okay, but it must not be terminated within 18 inches of the earth. Okay. And people say, well, what could that be from? Well, you could have other things like moisture, you could have snow, there's other things that could bring that up and cause additional issues, but the code is what it is, okay? A lot of times people want to say, well, what's the rationale? Let's go back 50 years, 30 years, 10 years. And like, no, the code's the code. It says it right now. It's not going to do you any good to go back and look unless you just want to be a historian, and that's fine. I don't have the time to do that. So I'm just like, the code is the code, that type of thing. So if installed external to buildings or not in an enclosure as covered in the number 2 we said above, which was inside of an enclosure, it says aluminum and this other conductor that is not copper, grounding electrode conductor, are not permitted to be terminated within 18 inches of the earth. The concern here is that in order to be terminated, the aluminum or that other conductor material must be exposed to the environmental conditions. As a safeguard, such terminations must be 18 inches or higher above the earth. Okay, it says the reason for not permitting aluminum or that other conductor to be connected within 18 inches or lower is the moisture in the air, there you go, will be greater within the first 18 inches of the ground. I'm sure y'all probably seen where you have like this, when you think about it, I think I've seen out when you have the temperature changes somewhere, what you see is you look out and you notice that there's like a cloud hovering in the ground. That's that moisture, or that dew level. Okay, so there you go. Also, by the way, this newest edition here of the grounding and bonding was actually, the material actually was written by Mark Odie and Phil Simmons. I didn't contribute on this edition of it, but they do extensive research, and a lot of this came from all of our other discussions, but that is maybe one reason. The other reason, again, could be in certain areas of the country, again, deep snow allows excessive moisture to come up. Some areas may be more like a floodplain. That could be an issue. So it seems like the code panel in the submittal agreed 18 inches, and then maybe there was some atmospheric condition data that was used during the submission. All we know is that it was submitted because it can't be terminated within 18 inches of the earth. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, now let's go on to B. Now B, let me get you back to code. So B is securing and protection against physical damage. Okay, so the first one we did here is just general, and then we had dealing with aluminum and that other conductor. Now we're just talking general, and this applies to both copper, aluminum, all of that. This is just general. This is protection now. How do we protect that grounding electrode conductor? Okay, now it says if it's exposed, a grounding electrode conductor, when we say if it's exposed, because it could be what? Running in the wall, down into the wall, and it could be going to, let's say, a UFR poked up in a wall with access to it. That's a grounding electrode conductor going to the UFR, so it may not be exposed, okay? Whereas if we're taking a grounding electrode conductor out of the building and down the side of the wall to a ground rod, for example, or rods, then that's exposed, right? Okay, just wanted to talk about it. So it says if exposed, the grounding electrode conductor or its enclosure, okay? So it could be running in an enclosure that's running to the electrode, shall be securely fastened to the surface on which it is carried. Okay, so For all of you guys that run your grounding electrode conductor out, let's say down the side of the wall that you're going down to the actual electrode, yes, it must be secured. Okay? Doesn't say where. So far, I don't see that it says every 12 inches, every 2 foot. It just says it has to be secured. Okay, gotcha. It says the grounding electrode conductors shall be permitted to be installed on or through framing members. All right, so let's see here. So a lot of people say, for example, the house that we were building at one time, the grounding, the UFR was on the other side of the garage. And so to get there, you ran it from the panel was the other side, you ran it up and through framing members over to get to the UFR, right? That's just an example. That's okay. It can be run through framing members. Now, we want to keep it as short as possible, but at the end of the day, can it run on or through? Absolutely, it can, all right? All right, now, let's talk about damage. So we're running a grounding electrode conductor. Now, let's say it's not exposed to physical damage. Me and you know that there is no definition. And I can already tell you, folks, I'm going to go over my hour today. So get some more coffee if you need to. Not exposed doesn't make Anthony happy. Okay? But that just means Anthony's going to be late for his next meeting because he's going to be here for this one. And so he's going to be always perpetually late, it seems. Okay. So not exposed to physical damage. It says a 6 and larger copper or this conductor or this conductor, okay, not exposed to physical damage shall be permitted to be run along the surface of the building construction without metal covering or protection. Okay, so if it's not exposed, I'm running a 6 gauge and larger. If I'm installing it, and notice it doesn't say 6 solid, it could be 6 stranded and larger. If I'm running this and it's not subject to any physical damage, again, we have no definition of physical damage, by the way. We have not been able to get that into the NEC because, again, you have a bunch of code people that sit at the table and we're all like, well, what's the physical damage? I mean, how do we define it? Okay, so, and then, of course, there's later in the code, there's what's called severe physical damage. And so we don't define that either. So I look at it as if it's likely to be damaged by just every day somebody walking along that could damage it. Not crazy Mary or wacky Bob who comes along with a hammer. We're talking about, is it in a location where it could be just physically damaged by just being there? I use that as my threshold. Again, remember, you have to do that and the HJ has to do that. And we have to use common sense because there's no definition of it. So if I'm running it down the side of a building, right, and I'm running it in the corner, or I'm running it in a way that there's really nothing around it, then look, you're a pretty piss poor AHJ. If I'm running a 6 gauge down to a ground rod and I'm running it out the building and I'm running it down the side of the building on the side, maybe 2 feet, down to rods. And I'm going down, I'm gonna dig a little trench into the ground to get it over to the rods. So it's all below grade, right? Okay. I have a little bit of 6 showing. No driveway on the side, it's just grass. I have heard inspectors go, that's subject to physical damage from a weed eater. What kind of weed eater are you using? I'm just saying, are you using the metal ones? Okay, again, we can't protect everybody from this cell. But the likelihood that that is really subject to physical damage is slim and none. Slim and none. I'm just saying. Now, as I tell people, if it's on the side of my house and my driveway runs along the side of my house and my wife or my son was driving, it is subject to physical damage the moment they pulled into the driveway. I'm just telling you. I've seen them. I've seen the front end of my cars. All right, I'm just telling you. Everybody has to make their own decision on that. But again, being subject to physical damage versus something that's not. Another thing that I usually tell people when it comes to physical damage is if I'm running something like if I'm running UF over to an outdoor unit, or I'm running UF or I'm running NM down, let's say as a whip, and I'm running over to the water heater. Everybody wants to protect that. If I'm running it behind the piping, or if I'm running it behind the water heater, or I'm running it behind the equipment or something like that, is it really subject to physical damage? No, because you would have to tear the crap out of the equipment to get to it. And by then you can't fix stupid. So we have to use common sense. Okay, enough of that. So let's say that it is not subject to physical damage. Then my 6 gauge running to the electrode does not have to be protected. It's fine. Okay. Now, what happens 6 and larger? Now, what happens if it is exposed to physical damage? So this is when it's not. If it is exposed to physical damage, or you make the determination like, yes, Mr. Abernathy, your wife could run into that running down the side of your house, and I think that it is subject to physical damage. Okay, well, then 6 and larger, copper, this conductor, or aluminum grounding electrode conductors exposed to physical damage shall be protected by rigid metal conduit. I recommend you not do it. Intermediate metal conduit, recommend you not do it. Schedule 80 PVC, ding, 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 use it. Okay, my timer's over, but we're going to keep going. Okay, if you got to go, I understand it. You got to get to work, make that money. But I'm long-winded today. My coffee was not spiked. I'm just long-winded. Reinforced thermosetting resin with the type XW. Dude, that's expensive, hard to find. I just would use 80 PVC. EMT, I do not recommend you use EMT unless you're going to use the aluminum type EMT. That creates other problems. Or cable armor. So they do make grounding electrode conductors that have a single conductor inside of an armor. Okay, and that was originally, it's still referred to as a single conductor cable, but it is designed that way, and it's very common. Y'all might have seen it. You look at it, you think it's little mini MC or little mini AC. You look at it, and you're like, what the hell would that be for? That is something that is allowed to provide protection, and there are many manufacturers that still make it. We do not make that. We do not armor single conductors like that, small, that type of thing, okay? But it is out there. My advice here is to use Schedule 80 PVC. Why? Because if you use any of these others with a ferrous raceway steel, then you're going to have to bond the GEC at both ends. Okay. Now, one end, if it goes to an enclosure, ultimately they're all bonded together anyway. You don't really have to do anything. Some people think you got to put a bushing on the end and loop it through at the box. You don't. And I clarified that with all the committee members at the last hearing that we were at, because it was an argument and Ryan Jackson put in something and it went over the whole committee's head. And I was like, guys, all Ryan's asking is, do we have to put a bushing with a lay-in lug in the panel? If I'm going from a panel into an EMT down to an electrode, I got to bond the grounding electrode conductor at both ends. If it's a ferrous raceway, is the one end, do I have to loop it through a lay-in lug? And the committee said, yeah. And then I said, wait a minute. The GEC has to go to the bus. The bus has to be bonded to the enclosure. The enclosure is bonded to the raceway. It's already bonded together. So I'm already connecting to the other end of the GEC. Then they were like, we went out in the hall and they were like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's okay. Yeah, you're right. But that doesn't help us on the other end where it gets down to the actual electrode, which you can put a fitting on the end that will physically connect the raceway to the grounding electrode conductor. Okay. That's if it's ferrous. All right. So that's why I say just run Schedule 80. You got to worry about it. I'm just saying. All right. Next. What if the grounding electrode conductors are smaller than a 6 gauge? If you got questions, again, put them in the comments. I promise you I will get to them. Although I'm not going to go into any new topics. So if you want me to elaborate on something else, not going to do it. Okay, I'm on a focus here. Recommend it, as I told you, send it to me for a topic for a future coffee hour. Okay. All right. Now, smaller than 6. It says grounding electrode conductors smaller than a 6 shall be protected by RMC, IMC, Schedule 80 PVC, RTRC, EMT, or that cable armor style that you can buy today. It's still available. So, again, I'm going to recommend, and obviously 6 and smaller is not an option. You're going to protect it. I am going to recommend, again, Schedule 80 PVC. And no, I'm not getting any money from the PVC industry. I'm just saying makes total sense. Okay? I'm just saying. All right? And the next is number 4. It says, in contact with the earth. Okay? So, grounding electrode conductors and grounding electrode bonding jumpers in contact with the earth shall not be required to comply with 300.5. So that's the depth requirement. So again, make it clear. And I have people that send me this. Well, wait a minute, Paul. When that GEC goes into the ground over to the ground rod, doesn't it have to have 12 inches of cover or 18 inches? No, does not have to. Okay. So there you go. Or 305. Now 305, just so you know, That's dealing with these other type of installation, and that is over 1,000 volts, and we're not covering that. We're focusing on 300.5. That is the depth of cover table and the rules for that. Does not have to comply with that. It doesn't say just the table. It says it does not have to comply with 300.5, period. Okay? But shall be buried or otherwise protected if subject to physical damage. So if it's coming off and, at the rod is right next to, say you're doing rods, it's right next to the building and it's coming down and over to it, it's not going to be subject to physical damage, people. I know people's mind want to go over, but it could happen. Get over it. We could be hit by a meteor tomorrow, okay? We could be invaded by aliens tomorrow, okay? Trump could get elected again. But he did get elected again. 5 more days. God bless America. All right. Who did I offend on that one? All right. So anyway, there you go. All right, so next thing we'll talk about is continuous. What does that mean? All right, so let's go back to the reading real quick and see if we can see if we got any other bullets that we want to point out here before we move on to that. So here we kind of covered, and I want to show you what's in the program. As you can see here, verbatim of the code, verbatim of the code, verbatim of the code, what we just went over. Now let's look at the discussion, because discussions are cool, okay? The discussions are this. It says, for what we just talked about, it says, a number of significant safety requirements are included in this section for installing grounding electrode conductors. Note that the requirements apply where the conductor is exposed, okay? Exposed. This term is defined in Article 100, includes the space above suspended ceilings. Hey, that's exposed, okay? So it is broader in application than where the conductor is just simply visible. Did you know that above a suspended ceiling that allows you access is still considered exposed? It's not concealed? Okay, anyway. As a result, wait a minute. This is that thing I wanted to point out here. Note as well that the rules apply to conductors that are exposed to physical damage and not exposed to, that are exposed to physical damage and not exposed to physical damage. What? Let me see. Let me read this again. Note as well that the rules apply to conductors that are exposed to physical damage and not. The rules apply to both those that are exposed to physical damage and not exposed to physical damage. Still, these rules have to apply in how you would run them. Okay, we covered that. Let's see here. And again, it's just a reminder, we have no definition of what physical damage is. The degree of physical damage and all that type of thing is really up to your AHJ and you to determine that. But again, we have to use a little common sense. I know people say that common sense isn't there, but we have no choice. We have to try to use a little common sense. Now, the one we just talked about, exemption, again, saying you don't have to meet the requirements of 300.5. That's depth of cover and all that for conductors in the earth. We don't have to meet that, okay? And again, 305 is for over 1,000 volts. Okay, we're moving on to the continuous. So let me get back to the code real quick and share this tab. So here we go. So we're talking about the continuous nature of your grounding electrode conductor. Okay, we have these comments that people have. Now let me see if I can get a few questions real quickly before I go on. Anthony says, Paul, can you touch later on how to calculate pulling a cable assembly through a raceway based off 53%? No, that's a pull calculation that you would have to do. And I'm going to tell you this, Anthony, what they need to do is the easiest thing to do with that is to forget that it's a cable and it's now a single conductor. And now they just follow the rules, the pulling rules that they would follow from their manufacturer will give them advice. That's not an NEC thing. They just can't, you have sidewall pressure issues. You have the pulling tension, which is really going to be based on the conductor itself, whether it's copper or aluminum. NEC doesn't really get into that. That's an installation thing. But you can demand that the engineer do a pull calculation. If you're going to pull a cable in a raceway, then you are going to have to treat it as if it is, you still got your fill, and you're still going to treat it the same way you would be pulling a conductor in there. So whether it's one end, now the only caveat when you're pulling a cable is, I'll tell you this, and I get this a question a lot, is how do I keep the armor or the cable from pulling away from the conductor inside of it? Well, you're going to have typically strip off a certain amount of conductor, leave the cable, and you need to do what you can do to mate the two together, whether it's a lot of tape, whether it's duct tape, whether it's whatever binding tape, whatever you need to do so they pull as one, because you're pulling it based on the conductor. You're not pulling it based on the cable, because when we do the calculation for the pull calculation, it's going to be using the conductor and it's not going to be using the cable sheathing at all. So we just need to make sure that the cable sheathing is going to be pulled with the conductor. So that's why we tell them strip off a certain amount, so exposing the conductors, and make sure they mate the cable very well to the actual conductor. Not exceeding the 53% will take care of itself, but I tell them to do a pull calculation, treat it the exact same way they would be if they were pulling single insulated conductors. Treat it the same way, okay? Let's see here. Let's see what we got. Catch up real quick because I want to make sure I catch it up. Anthony says Ryan Jackson also made a PI. Other silly equipment over. Yeah, we all make PIs. I don't know. Yeah, he probably was addressing something somewhere in there that he didn't agree with, and we all do that. And Ryan's a great guy, so. If he submitted it, it is probably something wonky that we need to change, and I hope we did change it. If it's something that Ryan sent, we obviously would have discussed it in that scenario. Ryan's not on code panel 5. Wish he was, because I think he's the kind of mind it would be great for us, with us all on code panel 5. I feel bad that he's over on 17, although he likes it. But God, 17, those people drive me crazy. All right, so let me go back here okay, so let's look at continuous. So we got our grounding electrode conductor, and now we're going to run it continuous. So it says, except as provided in 250.30A5 and A6, and of course that is dealing with you're dealing with separately derived systems, right? And it has some allowances, exceptions, and stuff down here. So except for those, and except for, again, this is also falling under .30, so that's separately derived systems, okay? And again, except as provided in 250.68C, okay, which is talking about the water pipe and 5-foot connections and all that. Other than those, okay, other than that, the grounding electrode conductors shall be installed in one continuous length without a splice or a joint. If necessary, splices and connections shall be made as permitted in the following. So this is a classic example in the code, where it says, okay, other than those allowances for separately derived systems, or maybe if you're making connection where you have the water pipes and sections of water pipe, or thing, other than those, your grounding electrode conductor needs to be continuous, unbroken. But then it proceeds to say, well, look, if it's necessary, if somebody came along, and not that they would, but some copper thief came along and stole your grounding electrode conductor and only left you a little bit, maybe it's going down to a UFER, then again, that is something that you got to look at the HJ and go, bruh, what am I going to do, bruh? I got to do something. I'm not going to dig this thing up. I mean, it wasn't me that cut it. Okay, that's just an example. So you have some allowances here if it's necessary. So you have to make your case, because the general rule is that it's continuous. It is not spliced. Oh, by the way, I should have touched on this. Remember when I said to the grounding electrode conductor that it going to, and then it said ranged bonding jumpers? This is a good example for me to bring this up. Folks, when you run your grounding electrode conductor to your ground rods and you stop that first ground rod, it does not have to be continuous through the first ground rod and continue it on to the second. That is not what this rule is saying. It's not saying it has to be. The grounding electrode conductor actually stops at the first. The reason you're having to put the second is because you can't show it's 25 ohms or less. So you just default it 2 for that. So a lot of people say it has to be continuous. Let's say you're running 6, because 250.66A says you can. If I'm running it through the ground rod, the clamp, and I'm running it on to the next one, the grounding electrode conductor is from the service grounded conductor terminal position to the electrode. That is your grounding electrode conductor. From that electrode to the other is a bonding jumper. It's connecting the two electrodes together to act as what? To act as one. Okay. So I have a lot of people that say, oh no, you can't splice that 6 that's going through the first rod to the second rod that's 6 feet away. That's got to be unbroken. No, sir, that is not true. It's to the first one. The second one's a bonding jumper. When they're bonded together, they act as one. Okay. Encourage you to go read 250.50 and read all those nuances that are involved because they're acting as one. Okay. Can I have just one? Absolutely. As long as I can show 25 ohms or less. And can I use an ohm meter for that? No, you can't. Okay. I'm not even going to elaborate on that. No, you can't. All right. So number 1 says, okay, look, splicing of the wire type grounding electrode conductor shall be permitted only by irreversible compression type connector. Okay, so give me some irreversible compression type connectors. Boom. And they have to be listed as grounding and bonding for grounding and bonding equipment, and they probably will be if they're going to be used for that type of application. Check with your counter person and your local supply house because they're the most knowledgeable people you're going to have in that building when it comes to hopefully the products they have. If not, contact the manufacturer or by exothermic welding. We're not talking Home Depot. Or by exothermic welding process. Okay, so if you're the guy that loves to do the exothermic welding, boom, exothermic weld it. As long as you have enough to do it, then you're good to go. That's acceptable. So an example where they didn't give you enough grounding electrode conductor, you got 2 options here for the wire type to extend it. Okay. Next, I can use sections of bus bars shall be permitted to be connected together to form a grounding electrode conductor. This is very common in switchgear, where in order to get through the switchgear, they have buses or sections of buses that are going to be for your termination of your grounding electrode conductor, which ultimately is going to connect all the way back to the grounded conductor or the grounded conductor terminal bus or position inside the switchgear. A lot of times that is made up of sections, a bus bar, and that's okay. Next, bolted, riveted, or welded connections of structural metal frames of buildings or structures. All right. So again, if you're using, for example, the structural steel to extend the grounding electrode conductor or extend the connection to earth, then it can be through bolted, riveted, and welded connections. Remember, we're not using that structural metal steel as an equipment ground. We're using it as a grounding electrode conductor or an extension of the earth connection. Okay. Whereas we may have the rebar connected over to the in-ground steel, or we might have the structural I-beams connected to the concrete encased electrodes, or we might be using the allowance where I'm using the building steel to extend my connection if the water pipe's coming in the front of the building and I need to bond it, but I have everything else is back at the back where the UFERs and all are. Then I have metal buildings, not the coverings like the sheet metal coverings, but we're talking about structural, okay, or the metal framing of the building. And it is continuous to the front and it's connected through bolts and rivets and welded points. Okay, then I can use the structure to extend that connection. Again, we're not talking about equipment grounds. We're talking about extending the connection to earth as for grounding electrode conductor connections, that type of thing, okay? And then lastly, we says threaded, welded, brazed, soldered, or bolted flange connections to metal water piping. So obviously, this has to do when we're making that connection down to the water pipe connection, okay? Whether we're trying to make it within 5 feet of the point of entry or longer than that, we're permitted by the code where you can see it, okay? There's specific applications where you could be further than 5 feet of point of entry of the electrode if it's a water pipe electrode. There's other allowances to be longer than 5 feet, but you have to meet those caveats. So for me and you, it's usually within 5 foot of entry, all those type of things. But the components that help make up this, you could have a coupling in there, okay, that's in that 5 feet. That's okay. It's brazed, welded, threaded, okay, that type of, all that's okay. Now, this is good because you heard me just elaborating about it, but here's a good example of what link gives you some context sometimes. It says a building remodeling project or the replacement of existing electrical equipment might necessitate, okay, you're adding something new or doing a renovation, it might necessitate splicing the GEC, okay? Well, section 250.64C1 contains and the permitted means by which the splice can be considered a permanent connection that provides the intended GEC continuity. Okay, so you have some options to be able to do this, right? Makes sense? Okay. All right. So let's go on to this here in the book, and let's see if we got any additional we want to add. Okay, so here you go. Let me share this. There you go. So here's irreversible crimps, right? And here's some exothermic welding. That's that bad boy. And these actually come from Thomas and Betts, okay? And which is now, I think, ABB. I think they've all merged into ABB, that type of thing. And again, our program also gives discussions, and it talks about irreversible compression type connectors, that type of stuff. So it gives you a little extra info in case you're into the digging deep into things, right? Okay. All right. And there you go. There's an example, a picture of where you have a bus bar that's extending. So they're connected together. Okay. And there's the example of a building's framing. That's all part of the structural framing. Okay. Looks like this is a groundwork section. Doing all the groundwork. This one here. Okay. All right. And then here is some examples of brazing. So you see where all these brazing and these connections, whether I connected right here, let's say, I'm just using numbers. Let's say the 5 foot of point of entry. I don't know where it's coming in, but if I was doing it and I was connecting to this piece of piping, brazing, soldering, all this kind of stuff. I guess it's all of that, welding, those type of things, the flanges that fit into it, male, female flanges and all this stuff. All of that is considered okay, fine, for as far as that connection. All right. Okay, so we're going to end on that one because 250.64D, which is talking about what we do with the grounding electrode conductor when we have separate enclosures, a single enclosure, multiple enclosures, how we run it to the electrodes, what are our options. That's going to be tomorrow's episode. We're going to cover in depth 250.64 because that's extensive and there's 3 different options that we follow when it comes to setting up our grounding scheme, whether or not we're when we have the electrodes or we have different, to kind of give you an example of that. Let's see here. Here we'll be talking about things like that, where we have the CTs and you end up having multiple disconnects. And we're going to look at all the options to have what's called one common grounding electrode conductor with taps. We're going to cover all 3 of those. We're going to cover the little questions that people ask me about if I have a 5,000 amp service, can I have just simple ground rods? Can I still run a 6 to it? Short answer is yes. Okay, it doesn't matter that it's the 5,000 amp service when it comes to using the allowances of 250.66A. But we're going to show you how to run whether you have multiple enclosures and things like that. That's what's going to be on tomorrow's topic. All right? All right, so I think I've answered all the questions that were in here for the most part. I appreciate all you joining me. Hopefully you got something out of today's episode. Tomorrow, come back and bring your questions. If you have topics, email me so I can be prepared for your topic, and maybe I'll be able to pull up something to explain it, maybe visual, makes you happy. Again, if you want to get Fast Track's tube, it's 50% off. I know some people contacted me and said the coupon wasn't working. I apologize. Jeff's in charge of that, and it expired, and I didn't know about it. So it's 50 OFF at checkout. It's not our courses. It's over at Fast Track's tube. Okay. So if you're not familiar with what that looks like, I'll just share that with you really quickly, just so you can get an idea. This is Fast Track's tube over here, and it doesn't look right because I've got my screen too big. But here's where we're actually watching, over on Fast Track's tube, watching the video, that type of thing. Okay. Doesn't look good. I didn't size the screen. But anyway, you get the point. So again, if you're interested in any of that, 50% off. Use 50 OFF at checkout, and you can get 50% off your annual subscription over at Fast Track's tube. All right, folks, I appreciate you. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for joining me, taking time out of your day. Have a safe day. We're almost there. After today, we got one more day, so get out there and make that money. Take care. God bless.